Come on, I'll do 50-50. Come on. What all bills you want me to pay? And what you paying? Or we doing half of everything? Babe, you cook tonight? Or am I cooking? Babe, you ain't take the garbage out. I'll go ahead and take it out. Babe, I'm finna fill up my car. I'm already at the gas station. Babe, your car need gas. I'm already at the gas station. I'll put it in. You ain't gotta worry about it. Babe, you in my car. Just make sure you put gas. I got you. It's already taken. Let me be stupid. Yeah. Come on, 50-50. Come on. Because I ain't getting it now. So come on. I'm tired of being by myself and doing everything by myself. I'm tired of being strong. I'm tired of being an alpha woman. I'm tired of being masculine. I am tired. Come on. Bring it on. What all you want me to do? What all you need me to do? What's up? What's good? You need your clothes ironed? That's already done. What's up? We washing clothes? That's already done.
Hello, Queen. Are you wanting to leave your corporate job, but worried about losing your income?
We don't wash dishes because we're using paper plates and paper cups and forks. Because I ain't washing dishes. That's one thing I'm not doing, is washing dishes. Because I clean as I cook anyway. For me to get up with a full stomach and go wash some damn dishes, I ain't doing it.
We live in the era of social media, where women are supposedly living their best life. You know, securing the bag, going on luxury vacations, leveling up in their lifestyle, jumping classes through social strategies and economic achievement, leaving these, quote, dusties, unquote, behind, and all the ways women are supposedly outpacing men. Along with that is the expectation that men keep up with their lifestyle demands and be able to provide equal or preferably more comfort and luxury than they can provide for themselves. These demands have some women today requiring men to pay 100% of all bills, calling men dusties who are unable to live up to these expectations. But outside of social media, real life tells a different story. The average woman is making around $44K annually, and the average Black man brings in just over $50K. Not to mention, homelessness has risen by 18%, and now majority of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Case in point, most people aren't living that luxury lifestyle. What social media provides is the fantasy of an elite and upper class person and lifestyle, but most Americans are actually living 50-50. That's the most viable option for them today when it comes to romantic relationships. And that brings me to this particular content creator who represents a generation of women who exist in reality outside of social media. They're willing to carry their own weight and go 50-50 on the bills. She started off by sharing how and why she wants to go 50-50 because life is hard alone and she is tired of carrying this weight by herself. And before I weigh in, I want to share more of what she has to say and then I'll break it down.
Number one, for the women that's on that post, not sure where I said anything about taking care of a grown behind me. Listen, I have a 19-year-old who has 2 jobs, his choice, and goes to a tech school. He don't ask me for money, I don't ask him for money. So there's nothing of me that can or will take care of a grown man. I just wanted to get that out of the way. Number 2, me saying 50-50 is not financially based only. 50-50 in the sense of right now, I am doing everything by myself, literally. Before this car, when I used to have a car, I would have to call a mechanic. I would have to call around to a mechanic. Either the mechanic's going to sexualize me or overcharge me because I'm a woman. But if I had a man, I wouldn't have to do. Like, y'all so caught up in this social media stuff where y'all think a man is supposed to come and take care of everything. That's inconsiderate. Why would you automatically entitle yourself to another human being's money, period? You don't want no man doing that with yours. So why would I sit there and tell this man, on top of everything else that he come with, you need to come and pay all my bills and all I'm going to do is cook and lay in the bed? No, we're not doing that. We go to the movies, you pay for the tickets, I buy the snacks. We all know how much that costs. We go out to eat, I'm tipping, and I'm a big tipper. Like, No, we're not doing that. You know, that you giving me, okay, hey, here go money for your nails and your feet. Thank you. Don't worry about that next one. I got it because you allowed me to say, well, like that's how I am. And for the men that's on my post saying, oh, she finally coming to her senses. I've always been like this because I've always been taking care of myself. I've never had a man. Never. I've never had a man. I've never been in a relationship. Never. I never met a real man. I never met what it felt like to be with a man. I never lived with a man. All I get are men who sexualize me because they are too weak to look past appearance to see that I am a grown woman who loves with all her heart that she can't help.
50-50 relationships are a myth. I mean, in reality, it's actually 100-100. You're not really keeping tabs if you love one another. You are just giving your all and giving your best to make that union thrive. And that you'll find that one person usually has a particular strength over the other, and the couple will figure out what works best for them. But it's all about putting in the effort. Now, she said a few interesting things, that she's tired of being strong, independent, and that she is willing to work with her man. She seems really open and ready to have a partnership with a man. And what she said sounds reasonable enough, especially considering the current economy. But there is one thing I think ladies like her might need to be aware of when they are looking to get into a relationship, even if they desire to share the financial responsibilities. If you want a real man, a quote-unquote alpha male, or just a strong man who was going to carry his own and has his own vision that he is working towards, they usually don't want a partner as in a co-equal. They are usually looking for a feminine counterpart. Now, the Bible says that a woman is given as a helpmeet. And now I am talking from the perspective of marriage and covenant relationship. And the reason it's important to understand what it means to be a helpmeet is because that means you will not have the same role as the man in the relationship. The thing is, women in America are often put into survival mode and sold the illusion that they can offer the exact same thing a man can. And it's just not true. God didn't even create us with the same function. So if a woman wants to learn how to get along with a man, not only is it important to understand the financial responsibilities that the two may decide upon, but it's also good to understand the roles of the masculine and the feminine and how they work together. And scripture gives us a really good idea of how this works. In marriage, it says the man is submitted to Christ and the woman is submitted to the husband as unto Christ, as unto God. And then it goes on to explain how the man actually provides leadership for the wife, and that the man is to lay down his life and love his wife as Christ loved the church. So again, you see the masculine and the feminine working together, both having a different function, but together building a union. Now, what does the leadership entail? Insight, perspective, legacy, vision, understanding, how to operate in hard times and in trials and warfare and hardship and lack. Men are created to weather those storms and have a unique ability to lead and bring order and structure, even in some of the most dire situations. That's the role men have. Women who want to work with a man have to be willing to be open to the insight and leadership that he is likely to bring. And this leadership doesn't have to be a control or domineering thing, but it's an important aspect of masculinity that we have to be open to. But what most don't understand is that the protection and provision that ladies desire from men also comes with the responsibility of leadership. So if a woman is working with a man, she's going to have to be willing to take some instruction from him. And it doesn't mean that the woman becomes a child, but it does mean a woman is willing to receive some insight, some correction, some instruction, or some guidance. And of course, the man can really benefit from his feminine counterpart as well. But I wanted to explain why the dynamics of the relationship may not work if the money is shared, but there's not an understanding of how the masculine and the feminine work together. It's about finding the balance. Now, a few of the things that I wanted to mention. She did say that she runs into the issues of men trying to over-sexualize her many a times. I understand this could be a challenge for women who are beautiful or who are voluptuous, but I will say that what a woman wears can really create a big difference on how she is treated. For example, this content creator, respectfully, she has shown some outfits that are quite revealing. And so, if a woman is showing off physical assets such as herself, and a man is looking at that and responding to those physical assets, via him being a heterosexual man, then we can't necessarily be surprised as women if those men respond naturally. Like, if you're just laying it out there, if there's no room for the imagination, if the breast out there, or the booty's out there, men are going to respond. Now, I understand there are certain things you can't fully hide. Like, if you're a big breasted, you can't fully hide it. If you have a big old booty, you can't fully hide it, especially if you had a BBL work done. I mean, at that point, you wanted the attention. But I'm saying, like, if you wanted to change your mind or try to downplay it as much as possible, covering it up can really make a big deal. That can be a really simple way of, minimizing the potential of men just over sexualizing. Just a few things to consider. And I know some of y'all gonna be mad at this and say, oh, well, men shouldn't sexualize me. They shouldn't sexualize me if they see my big old breast or booty. But if a man is heterosexual, you can't knock him for being a freaking heterosexual man. Like, they're going to respond to beauty. So you just have to be honest about nature there. Anyways, y'all, those are my thoughts. What y'all think? Let me know down in the comment section. I wish this content creator luck and other ones like her. I hope you found this useful, and we'll talk later.
I'll slate it.
I'm muted. Can y'all hear me now? Okay. Hey, everybody. Happy Wednesday. I think about happy Wednesday. Shout out to everybody in the building. Good to see you. Hey, hey, hey. Be sure to like, share, subscribe on the way in. Y'all know the drill. Also, if you would like to show support to the show, you can do so. Find me on Cash App or Venmo, Shay Charday. Well, I'm not going to waste too much time. I'm really excited about today's conversation. It is a continuation of reaction videos I did just a few weeks ago, where I ran across this interview that got a lot of traction across social media, and it was basically a professor who was going on to share a critical lens in feminism. And I've mentioned before that I find that we live in a space, I think personally, where a lot of ladies are infantilized. It's rare that I will hear a woman really of any age, even more mature woman, who will come online and actually be really honest about the things that they've done that maybe they weren't the proudest of, or things that they've done that they maybe would have changed, or just acknowledge of something in their life or something that's being promoted is just flat out wrong. I feel like there's a lot of just caping. We see this time and time again. I mean, especially with celebrities, these Gen Z celebrities right now, or not Gen Z, is it Gen X? Y'all, I get them mixed up. I think it's Gen X celebrities right now are just, I see so many going on episode after episode after episode talking about, oh, they have grief, and their grief that they don't have relationships, but that they don't have a man, or they don't have kids. Oh, but they're happy that they didn't settle. I just feel like there's a lot of capping going around. And so to me, it's means a lot when I hear somebody who's able to come online and actually just have a critical lens, towards some of these different ideas that have been promoted for decades. And one of those ideas is feminism. We know we live in a feminist, arguably post-feminist society, depending upon how you look at it. And I think for a long time, it's just never really had a lot of criticism. You just are supposed to assume that it's everything related to it is great, everything related to it is gospel, and everything related to it is pure. And that's just not always the case. And so I'm excited to bring on the special guest who can share her perspective and her knowledge about someone who actually really grew up when it was really taking off, and providing just a different perspective on maybe some of the strengths and some of the ills of feminism, and what that means for younger generations, and how I think we can be a lot more critical about the messages that we are getting today. So without further ado, I'm going to bring her on, and we will get into the conversation. Hey.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Interesting. The content that you had leading into this is exactly what I was talking about online yesterday with someone, the dressing. And the leadership is the subject of an essay I'm going to start tomorrow, which is the second chapter in the book I've been working on, about male leadership and deferring to the male as the leader.
I'm really interested. So much to unpack there. Now, before I go into my question, because of what you just said, I have a few questions I want to ask about that. But would you mind? Do you want to introduce yourself to the audience? Is there anything specifically you would like to let people know about just who you are before I go into the questions?
Yeah, so I've been teaching in universities for over 20 years.
Okay.
And I'm a writer. That's actually was my intention, but survival gets in the way. So I just finished a novel I've been querying this week. It's called SEXODUS, and it does it addresses some of these issues. The protagonist is 53, realizing she has no legacy. Comes across some guy who took advantage of her 20 years earlier after a kind of a humiliating night out with a friend who has kids, who cuts the dinner short to bake pies with her daughter, leaving the protagonist alone. She's facing the Thanksgiving holiday. So she's in a really bad mood, and she sees this guy online, and he posts this feminist rant, and she just gets enraged and buys a ticket out to South Bend to Indiana to confront him. So spent a lot of time in the manosphere doing research for the novel.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and then the second book is it's called Requiem for the Patriarchy, and it is a sort of an amalgamation of cultural artifacts with my response and my personal experiences, and some data.
That sounds. So these are two books that you're working on currently.
Yeah, I'm just working on. I just finished SEXODUS, so I've been querying this week. Looking for an agent.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. Well, I look forward to hearing when it finally drops.
Fingers crossed. It's a rough world out there in the literary world these days. I wish I'd finished this a long time ago, but here we are.
You have a Substack, correct? That's where
and then that's where I'll be punished. That's where I'll be punishing. That's where I'll be publishing the next essay, hopefully within the next week. It's called Patriarchy CORN, Panic in Year Zero. It's an analysis of a 1962 film about a nuclear blast and a man and his family and how they survive it.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. You guys you can check her out on Substack if you want. And I can also post the links in the description, because it sounds like you have some really interesting content coming up. So with that, you mentioned something about male leadership that I find fascinating. How do you go from being a avid, feminist to now talking about the importance of male leadership? I mean, how do you go? That's like a 180-degree turnaround.
Okay, well, let's clear up a few things in terms of avid feminists. So one of the reasons why I got on Leslie's channel was because they're all a little younger than I am, and they were talking about why they don't have children. And I said, I actually grew up right when this change took place. So it's just sort of my generation that pushed this or went along with it. And I would say, in a sense, it was more like a tsunami. You just got swept away in the currents. Like AI is going to completely change our society, right? The internet has changed everything. Yeah. So we can say that feminism is synonymous with, any kind of technological or revolutionary change. And you're sort of participating. I participated in it, but I would never really felt like I was a feminist. I felt more like I had to be a feminist, or I had to, or I should. But I was not doing the Take Back the Night marches, or anything like that. I was kind of, but I lived it. I lived it and I made those choices.
Okay.
So it's kind of funny, you can call me an ex-feminist. That's okay. But I really just kind of did those things and sort of got swept along, I would say. And it's also I made those choices.
Okay. So you were saying you weren't necessarily on the picket line, but
no, absolutely not. No.
You were culturally feminist, or you were culturally influenced by the movement.
I mean, it was such a heavy influence, especially when I was in 6th grade. And you can imagine being that age and all anyone is talking about is this great new lifestyle. That women can now do this and can now do this because we have the pill, we have Roe v. Wade. These changes took place right around that time as I'm coming of age.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I was going to ask you mentioned 6th grade being a time where you can remember that they really were like hammering home feminism and piling it as like a new lifestyle, like a new and improved lifestyle that was incorporating to women. What would you say were some of the primary maybe messaging or imagery you got? Was it women going to jobs? Was it women driving like nice cars? Was it women who they showed multiple sexual partners? Like what was some of the primary themes or motifs that you saw in that time?
Oh, that's interesting because, at that time I'm still living in a patriarchal world. Okay. I'm growing up in a suburb of Chicago, and there's a dad in every house and kids filling each household pretty much. But there's one day that really stands out in my mind in 6th grade. The teacher made a really big deal of myself and this other girl being the 2 smartest girls in the class. And these girls are so smart, and really pushing that we were brilliant and not paying any attention to the boys. It was, and I vividly remember this being sort of, her being on the zeitgeist, like really pushing Darlene and Lisa as the next great things. And I remember a boy named Troy saying, well, then why don't you burn your bras? Because we were also very, very proud of wearing bras. And it just so happened my mother wouldn't let me have one. So I would go to school with a bikini top under my shirt so that I could get my bra strap snapped. So there was, this hyper femininity combined with this promise of this brand new life. And we were talking about it in class, and it was on TV. Picket lines were on TV. I don't know. Have you ever seen the PBS documentary on the sexual revolution, which I watched maybe a few years ago? And viewing it from here, I could hear the propaganda. Like,
I'm
just like really heavily biased about how great this was and how oppressed women were, and they were busting out, and so that's also it. And I have to also say, every person has their individual story in these cultural shifts. And my own mother was very resentful of being a housewife. And she had to get married because she was pregnant. So, but I honestly, I don't know what she would have done otherwise. She's very talented in a lot of ways. She was working in a publishing company when she got pregnant with me. But she was filling my head with this too. So there's a day I remember I'm something like 5 years old, and she's standing over me and she's saying, you are not going to have children. You are not going to get married and have children. And I'm looking at her like, I don't understand, what's going on, why she's talking to me like this. And then there was also, her telling me that girls have to do this, and this is what happens. And then you get stuck with a baby. And it was not very prudent with her, with her bitterness. And that also affected me, obviously.
Okay. I mean, that is, so you're saying feminism based upon that, now correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like feminism was something that was being taught to you at home from your own mom.
Yeah, in a way it was, I was destined for something better than this was the, tacit understanding. But she was actually having a pretty good time. I don't think she realizes it. And she did tell me later, I think your life is actually much harder than mine, and I'm really sorry for the things that I said to you.
So she apologized.
And actually, recently, she has dementia now. She said something she's never said before. Just a couple of weeks ago, she said, "I think you would have made a great mother." And I feel really bad about it, about some of the things that I said to you.
Wow.
She might have gotten me confused with my sister, who really also really would have been a good mother and isn't very ambitious and wound up childless. Yeah.
Okay. So that was something that you and your sister got the message to be childless. Now on that, I mentioned to you, because this is a trend that I see being promoted more and more among millennials, and I think just younger. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with, I think there was an interview that Tracee Ellis Ross did a few weeks ago that went viral, where she basically talked about her grief of being, now in the place that she's at, where she's very successful, but also not having children, and also not ever having been married. And so she opened up about that, but then like real quickly jumped into how happy she is with her accomplishments and how she would rather be single and not settle than settle and have a toxic relationship. So she really moonwalked back from that real quickly. But yeah, I just wanted to put that just in the back of your brain. And then I wanted to show you some videos that I'm seeing this among, like I said, millennials and even younger generations who are, I think, contemplating more and more being child-free by choice. It's becoming more of a thing. So I'm going to show, let me see, because I saw one video that I wanted to show you. I mean, there's quite a bit. There's quite a bit that go on this topic, but again, guys, as you guys are coming in here, like, share, subscribe. If you guys have any specific questions, feel free to put it in the chat. Super chats also are the best way that I can know or just keep track of all the comments, because I'm not always able to keep track of the comments, but that helps me. So, okay, let me try to pull up a video. Give you 1 second. Oops, sorry, I had it up and then it went down. Bear with me, technical issues. Yeah, I mentioned there's this other largely driven by the economy. Talks about as dinks. It's dual income, no kids. I'm seeing more and more and more of that. And what's so interesting about that trend is to see how much of it is actually driven by the economy, or how many people say it's driven by the economy.
Yeah, I think that's a myth, because people were having children in much worse economies than this.
Right.
I think it's interesting that people are much more risk averse with the children. And and that's an interesting thing to think about, why, because the women on Leslie's show, when I want to respond to this, it was every single one of them was saying, I wouldn't risk, basically implying that they wouldn't risk having children with this guy or that guy or that guy. And that was also my problem. So where am I getting this idea from, when my mother just got pregnant and settled.
They just had kids and then they got married once you had whoever you had a kid with. So it's like, where this idea of risk, and that's really great. So I want to show this one. I saw the downside of not having kids. This is one. Let me see.
Me, there's only one major downside of not having kids. And no, it has nothing to do with a nursing home or being a lonely cat woman, is that people don't take you seriously. Everyone expects people who don't have kids to be accommodating to their choice to have kids. What happens is we get the brunt of the work when we don't want it, and we don't get twice the pay. And we're just supposed to be understanding, like, well, she went on maternity leave. That was her choice. To have a baby, you better replace her with someone temporarily to take over that position. I'm not saying you have to fire her, but we need someone to fill in. It ain't gonna be me. You want me to take her role with not her pay? That's crazy. People think because you don't have kids, well, you have all this free time and you can do it. Yeah, but the free time is for me. There was the reason why I didn't have children. It was to make sure my free time was for me, not to do your job and my job. I still got a dog at home. He has to use the bathroom. He has to walk. So no, I can't stay 2 extra hours later just so you can go pick up your kid. Go get a babysitter. Go get a date, whatever. Your choice to have a child is not my responsibility, ever.
Okay, so I'm seeing more of this trend. Women talking about how, they love not having kids and they can focus on themselves. I'm curious, as you said you've been on this journey, and it sounds like you said your sister too. I'm just curious your response to just initial thoughts to that.
Well, I had 2 interesting conversations with millennial women who are childless recently that I've been thinking a lot about.
Okay.
The first one, similar issue to this woman.
Mm-hmm.
She was very resentful that parental leave was agreed upon in her company and that it was going to be taken out of her check. I met her with her mother. She was with her mother, and my cousin we were having drinks. And I said, well, maybe they should just change it to family leave, because you're going to end up having to take care of your mother at some point. And she's, and the other one I met at the gym, and she's an only child. And her mother was a very important diplomat, as she put it, a very high-powered woman, career woman. And now her father has dementia and her mother is taking care of him. And she said something along the lines of, imagine having this big career and then you end up stuck with this person with dementia that you have to take care of. And I said, well, what do you expect her to do? Like throw him away? There was just this
what? That's her husband.
Complete callousness and, and then just this insistence that they shouldn't have to, that you as an individual shouldn't have to be trapped in any way. But, the thing is that, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot, and it was something that even, 30 years ago, I wanted to prevent and just wasn't able to do it, which was my mother has dementia and she has 4 children, and there's one child is watching out for her, and we're all kind of keeping an eye on her. And if I get dementia, I'm going to be walking around in Brooklyn, basically hoping for the kindness of strangers for the most part.
In Brooklyn, all places.
No, I can't wait. There's a TV series in there. I have a funny feeling. So yeah, both millennials, and I think I said something like, by this time it's too late for them to have children. They're maybe 42 years old, but definitely had a completely kind of really callous, cynical, very independent, like this is me, I'm not contributing to this pool of funding to take care of other people. And interestingly enough, since I've basically been taking care of myself this whole time, I notice in myself a lack of generosity out of fear of falling through the cracks. I'm not the person who's giving, if there's a baby shower, I'm not the one giving, the big cash donation. I give the least I can get by with. Not because I don't want to give a gift for to a fellow employee for having a baby, but I'm worried about running out of money.
Yes. You're saying
I can steel man what they're saying, because you can't really, you're really always vigilant about falling through the cracks.
Yes. And you're saying, interesting. You're saying that the callousness that can be shown, you think sometimes that can be a projection for fear of no one else being there for them when they fall into times. Is that?
I think they're not thinking about it.
Okay.
I think they're just oblivious to that reality. Although the one with the father who has dementia, just this idea that, she's stuck and this shouldn't have to happen to her. But we're also talking about increasingly people thinking or being conditioned to believe that they have control over everything in their lives, and that life isn't something that in part happens to you, and then you ride the waves, right? You navigate. There's just seems to be much more of a misguided sense that you have to be in complete control of everything. So heaven forbid you should get stuck taking care of a spouse with dementia. I mean, that's just not part of my plan.
I can't. Wait, wasn't that spouse her dad?
Yes. Yes. And that's the other thing, she said something about, well, at least he's nicer to me than he was. And I'm just thinking, I really wanted to get in there and learn more. And I can't help projecting what I've been seeing culturally, through her, that maybe, the dad is bad and the mom is good because men bad, right? That kind of thing. Not accepting dad's masculinity. I mean, I can't even honestly begin to imagine being an only child in the first place.
That's the other sibling.
That's the other issue. She's an only child.
That is fascinating. That is absolutely fascinating. Huh. Okay. So yeah, that is nothing that I would, I mean, I don't know. I'm still trying to catch up with the idea that she's talking about that. That's like her dad. That's her dad, and she's just like, I get to be stuck taking care of my dad.
Yeah, this big career woman stuck taking care of somebody with dementia. Like,
whew, that is insane. And I mean, that's a whole other thing. There's one other video I wanted to show you on this topic that I saw get a ton of traction, and it's this idea of all of the problems that this person is escaping from being let me see, child free. And so I wanted to play just a little bit of this because again, these are ideas that I see being promoted more and more. It was like, wow, child free, focus on yourself. You're living your own life. You don't. All I have to think about when I wake up is what am I eating for breakfast? Like just life is so free and liberating, and it's fulfilling. And I am not, stuck with these diapers and these things. So I'm going to play a little bit of this. Let's see if I can make it a little faster, real quick. Oops, sorry about that. It's a whole trend.
I've escaped 80% of life's problems by not having children. So I did a video about this on my YouTube channel last year.
Sorry, I thought I showed it.
It was my most viewed video to date.
Right. Back. Okay.
I've escaped 80% of life's problems by not having children. So I did a video about this on my YouTube channel last year, and it was my most viewed video to date, where I talk about how
The only thing that I have to worry about when I wake up in the morning is, do I want coffee or tea? And there's no legitimate reason under the sun for me to ever change that. A lot of people don't have a deep understanding that for many of us child-free women, the decision to be child-free really just comes from not wanting to make our lives harder than it has to be. Because it's like, why would I do that, right? I talked about how I don't have to worry about stuff. And then if I had kids, I would have to worry about a bunch of things, like overnight. If I, right now in my life, I no longer have to live paycheck to paycheck. Now, I'm not bragging or anything like that, but I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck because I used to live like that a long time ago. And now I don't have to. Like, I even have things on auto pay now, because we always joke about, you made it if you got things on auto pay. Like, just take it out of this account. You know what I mean? I have stuff like literally coming out of this account on auto pay, like every week, every month, whatever. And so I literally would go right back to living paycheck to paycheck again and struggling again if I had children. And I have no intentions on doing that. And I don't understand why that's hard for people to get. It's almost like people want you to be miserable with them because they're miserable. Because it's like, what part of I'm comfortable and I don't want to change that do people not get? Like, and if you're pretending to not get it, I'm thinking it is because you're miserable and you're upset that other people won't be joining you in your misery. I never have to know what it's like to have a kid unalived in a school, pew-pewing, or to be bullied or harassed or unalived in any way, assaulted in any way. Like, I'm never going to have to experience that. I don't want to experience these things, you know? A lot of times you guys think that going through things builds character. And I'm like, maybe it does in some ways, depending on what it is and who it is. But I don't want to go through my kids being harmed and unalived to build my character. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to go through homelessness to build my character. I don't want to lose everything that I've worked hard for. I don't want to go back to living paycheck to paycheck to build my character. I would rather build my character by reading books, by learning about different cultures and learning about people and studying human psychology and studying plants and animals and whatever. You know what I mean? Studying the universe in which we live in, right? I would rather build my character by getting out and helping to volunteer at soup kitchens and stuff. Like, that is how I build my character. And I don't associate struggle with building character, especially if it's something that you can avoid. I am not about to get up every day and make my life a living hell just because people think that's what makes a real woman or that's what makes a real adult when you have all these 1,000,001 responsibilities. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. And I'm speaking for myself, and I'm also speaking for all the other child-free women out there, and even women who have kids but are like, I'm one and done. You know what I mean? Or I'm two and done, and that's it. Y'all got me effed up. So people have the right to live their lives how they want. But the reason why I say I escaped 80% of life's problems by not having kids is because most problems that women have in their lives tend to come from the stresses of parenthood or motherhood.
Okay. So there's a lot there. But I wanted to share that because I think it's safe to say that what she is sharing, she embodied a lot of different ideas that I'm hearing more and more about when people who are just turning away from childhood, turning away from having children at all. So I just wanted to get some of your thoughts on that. Just initial reaction.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
Okay.
And I have engaged the people online saying similar things like this, and I'm sort of hiding behind my fake name, you know, and saying, you know, you don't really want to end up alone, you know, it's not a good idea. And it could happen anyway, you know, but you don't want to sort of deliberately go there. And what do you think life is about anyway? It sounds like she thinks life is about having as easy a time as possible.
Yes.
Avoiding any kind of challenge. She got herself to a comfortable place, and notice that she equates having children with hell on earth. having to worry, I don't need to go through that, and I mean, in some sense, she's right. I have a similar life. Although actually, no, I can't get up whenever I want. I have to work. No, I don't have complete control over my time. And I've had to work very, very, very hard to keep little Darlene from falling through the cracks. So I don't know. I think if you have children, it actually might be a greater motivator to make more money. But I don't know. Does she assume that she would be a single mother also? I was wondering about that.
Yeah, because the way it's being described, it's as if there's the expectation that a father isn't going to be around.
Right. It's all her responsibility and all her worry. Yes.
Yeah. Fascinating. Very fascinating. Okay.
I've also heard, I've also heard people or read people saying things like, well, I will be able to save all this money that I would have spent on children for my golden years. So it's a similar thing to what I said earlier about how I'm kind of a miser because I'm so afraid of falling through the cracks and I'm holding on to my money. And so there's a lot of talk like that from women who are aging out of their fertility. Oh, well, I'll all of this money is for me, so I won't be in that position because I won't have to spend it on somebody else.
So do you think they use that as like as a badge of honor, or it's somewhat of a coping mechanism?
I think it's defiance. I mean, we're in a period right now where we're denying biology, right? So it's this defiance of biological reality and your biological imperative as a human being. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Real quick, I wanted to acknowledge some of the super chats. Shout out to you guys. This one says, feminism seems to breed selfishness in both men and women. What is your forecast for society economically, socially, if the trajectory isn't changed?
Yeah, what do you think? It definitely breeds selfishness, but I think that, honestly, the women are less aware of how men feel about what's been going on, and they seem in denial if you try to tell them.
Well, see, and it's this word of awareness, because I used to think it was that, but now sometimes I wonder, is it awareness or is it apathy? Is it that there is not only a, I guess, lack of understanding, but there is a really lack of concern to want to care. You
know about the empathy gap, right? Do you know about that?
The empathy gap? I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, well, that's a manosphere term.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
And it's in a lot of the men who are writing about men's issues. There is allegedly an empathy gap from women to men. They just don't seem to be able to empathize with them. And yet, it doesn't necessarily work the other way around, because men are biologically wired to protect women, and women are biologically wired to expect protection. Yeah. And so they don't feel, their empathy is wired towards the children, yes, not necessarily towards the husband, who is, perhaps if you just distill it to its essence, is the machine who's doing the providing, and her attention is all completely turned towards the home and what she's taking care of.
Well, and it's interesting you say that, because even if I think of how marriage and family can be explained, and from religious standpoints, right? Like I identify as a Christ follower, and there's a very clear understanding in how the family structure works, right? It's like man submits to God, the woman submits to the husband as unto God. The man is commanded to love his wife, and the wife is commanded to respect her husband, right? It's different. The man is given commandments to lay down his life for his wife, to sacrifice his life if needed. But the woman is given the command to just respect and honor his leadership. And so even I could think even within religious settings, you can see that there are very different roles given to men and women. And this is why I've said, and I say this more and more and more, where it's like men and women are not equal. I mean, I think maybe perhaps equal as far as value, but certainly not equal as far as function. There's no doubt in my mind that
where's the imbalance, on the women's side or the men's side, in your opinion?
I think if we're just talking about in America, right, and we're talking about, or just in the Western society in general, there's a lot to that, but I certainly think there is an imbalance when it comes to, as you mentioned, the empathy gap. We could just take a prime example, dating. That's just start there. That's just like the elephant in the room. It's just so obvious. The dating has become so confusing today because we do live in a feminist society where women are given all kinds of equality and giving liberation, or given agency to really do plenty of things. But there's still this innate desire to be treated with chivalry, or to be treated as if you are a dainty, delicate, flower that actually needs protection, that needs provision. And the thing is, how can you, if either you're equal, right? Either you're equal or you're somebody that I need to protect. But you can't have it both ways. You can't want, okay, I'm doing my thing over here, I'm boss babe, I'm all these things. I can have my own money, I'm independent. But then now it comes to dating, you want the man to open the door, you want him to completely pay everything, you want him to send you flowers, these very old traditional roles that existed under chivalry. Mm-hmm. So I think it gets, and I've heard men say this, even something as simple as men approaching women. This is a trend that I see all the time now, where women are coming online and be like, why aren't men approaching me? I'm super confused. And I've seen countless men be like, well, y'all told us that you didn't want us to approach us. Y'all said that can be considered patriarchal. It's harassment. If a man approaches a woman and the woman doesn't find the man attractive, it's harassment. It's only chivalry if the woman finds that man attractive. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So it's I actually think that things were more equal when, in my childhood, when everyone got married and had kids. I actually think it was more equal then. But it wasn't necessarily. Women have always been treated, whether they will recognize this or not, as precious cargo. The so-called oppression was to protect them because, biologically speaking, it takes 9 months to gestate a human inside of one woman, whereas a man, you only need one man on that island to repopulate. So that's another term in the manosphere. Disposable. The men are disposable. You could send, half your town to war, half the males coming of age get killed in that war. But, if you still have 10 left, you can still repopulate, but you need 20, 30 women. So, just by costuming, if you watch an old movie, the women are wearing these big gowns, they fill up the whole room. And I've asked my students, I've said, so look at the way women are dressed compared to men. Who's designed to get more attention and be treated like they're special? It's women. It's not men.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't even think men really demand that.
No, they're not. They have completely different interests.
Yeah,
that's the other thing. So things were more equal. I would say, if you think about the old family structure, and I'm not suggesting that we go back to that, although the current system is just so problematic that people are not risking it.
Yeah.
Just in my own household, my dad went to work every morning like a donkey. And my mother was home all day with us, making things, taking care of the house, hanging out with her friends, sewing, going shopping, whatever. And she maintained a home in exchange for him going out and working and paying for everything. So the roles were very clear. And what feminism did was say, oh, those gender roles are bad. And now nobody knows what they're doing. And it just brought more conflict into the relationship. And I can say also, as someone who partnered with someone in a business capacity who demanded 50-50. And it was actually my idea, and I was actually doing most of the work. And I had a Hollywood friend who was going to get involved in the project, and he and I are alone on Zoom. And the first thing he says to me, he says, "Please don't tell me you signed a 50-50 contract with her." And I was like, "What?" He said, "It's never done in Hollywood. It's always at least 51-49. Because somebody has to be the leader. Somebody has to make the final decisions." And what I learned from navigating this with her was it was just this constant negotiation. And so now women want to get divorced because they don't want to have to constantly negotiate with their husband about the child. Okay, I just read this in a Miranda July piece the other day. Oh, now that I'm parenting alone, I don't have to deal with this other person. Well, in the older model, she had the things that she did in the home and with the children, and he had the things that he did in the home with the children. And in exchange for his work, she took care of the house and the kids. And it's never been the case that women weren't working or weren't allowed to work. Yes. That's also a crazy myth. I don't know how they get by with even saying that. And then when the kids are in school, she becomes a real estate broker or something like that, right? Yeah. The whole equality argument is very Orwellian, and it's just absolutely become, I would say, completely unequal at this juncture.
So you're saying in an effort to make things more equal,
it's
became less equal than it actually was before.
Right. And now you're constantly negotiating, like he has to wash the dishes. My partner I've been with for, long time. He's a workaholic. He just wants to be out all day. I just wash the dishes. I just take care of the house. I just do it. He doesn't know how lucky he is. I never bother him about anything. He's like the sheep herder. He's just got to be out all day doing what he does. And I just take care of the house. We never really even talked about it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean,
I can't even imagine forcing him to do some household chores after he's been out walking all day. I just
doesn't seem right.
Even, and if you care about somebody, why would you bicker with them over washing a dish?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much more important things in life than to bicker over a dish.
Mm-hmm. And that's what marriage has become, right? Well, you're supposed to be participating in the household chores, and because she's also working 40 hours a week, and I just, that's just not the only problem that it really solved was that women were wholly dependent on men, right? And if he was a cad, or if he was lazy, or if he kept losing his job, this puts her in a precarious position.
Yeah. I totally see that. Real quick, I wanted to acknowledge Malarkey. Shout out to Malarkey with the 15 pounds. It says, "Enough is enough." Our sister Shay Sade puts in a ton of work hours to enlighten our men and women folk. Time she got some UK pounds. Like, subscribe, and donate to keep our queen on top. Thank you so much, Malarkey. I appreciate you. Appreciate you so much. I think what you said was really interesting about, in an effort to become more equal, things actually became a lot less equal.
Yeah. And there should be at least a 51-49 split.
There has to be a leader.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think feminism may have unintentionally harmed women, men, or families?
Well, the biggest one is there's no difference between men and women, which I imbibed much to my great suffering, actually. I think it's really hard for anyone younger to fully comprehend what it was like to be coming of age at a time when you're no longer a slave to what your body can do. You can control it. in ways that you could never control before. Although I actually never really was on the pill, I have to say. I took it like everybody. I took it, and I didn't like the way it made me feel, and I stopped taking it. But the abortions I certainly participated in. You know, one issue too is that we kind of looked at them as a form of birth control, which is really heinous to think about now. But we were young, you know, and when you're young, you're not really thinking very deeply about things. So, you know, this is impacting us as we're coming of age, as our hormones are raging, you know, like Roe v. Wade is like what, 1973, I was 12 years old.
Wow.
Oh.
Whoa. Okay. So you guys were like, woo, like,
yeah, I'm not going to get trapped. I don't have to get trapped. And so the situation of, you know, family is seen as a trap. The new technology is, you know, the narrative surrounding that is you're no longer trapped. And now there doesn't have to be a difference between men and women because women are no longer burdened by this biological reality. You can control it. You can just throw it away, or you can pill it away. And, you know, so I go out there really thinking that I can live like a man. I can have sex like a man. I can do whatever I want. And then I'm sort of denying how I really feel about, you know, and I'm going to say, I had 5, there was a group of 5 of us, you know, we called ourselves the Coyotes, and we would, you know, yell things at boys, you know, out the car windows. We did really some very, very crazy unladylike things, I have to say.
Okay.
But I was probably wilder than my other friends were because they could get boyfriends, and for whatever reason it was rougher for me to get a boyfriend. So I, by default, you know, messed around a lot more.
Oh, okay.
And you know, the truth is that women are not like men. We don't feel the same way about sex. You know, deep down, want to have children, getting mixed messages, don't know which way to go. And also there's this illusion that you have all of this control over everything, but actually you don't. Now, where my mother was dating to get married, my mother's generation, everybody dated to get married. That was the end goal. Everybody shared that goal. My generation, I would say, is the first where you don't really know what you're doing. And about half the girls in my high school just went and got married. They didn't go to college. Some of them, you know, they got pregnant from their high school boyfriend, and maybe that relationship didn't really work out, and then they married somebody else and stayed married to that person.
Right.
So a lot of them, you know, went the high school to motherhood pipeline. And I remember looking at them and thinking they were just so dumb. I mean, why would they do that? You don't have to do this anymore. You know, you can go out and have a career. Like, what was wrong with them? And I even sort of assumed I was better than they were because I was going to do these really great things, but I wasn't doing anything. I was just working in restaurants and living in a crappy apartment and thinking that I'm leading this exciting, you know, Mary Tyler Moore life, but it was actually pretty lonely, and I was broke and, you know, certainly not progressing really in any real way, while they're, you know, they've already got 3 kids.
So interesting. You're saying that, well, a couple of things here, because in theory, theoretically, feminism is supposed to be about giving women choice and equality, right? If they can choose to marry, they can choose not to marry. They
always had choices, though. I mean, you know, that's the other thing. It's like nobody ever was forcing women really. I shouldn't say nobody. That's terrible. It's just what people did, right? It's just what people did. But, you know, in my own family, my grandmother's cousin was a lesbian, and bought a house with her girlfriend, and they lived together. My grandmother would never have admitted that they were gay, but they were. I had wound up on a camping trip next to the camper of the gym teacher from our high school with her girlfriend. You know, they weren't, you know, so it's kind of, you know, what do you mean? What do we mean by choices? That's also a theme in my novel. Like what is that supposed to mean? Because I wanted to get married, and I actually didn't really have the choice. Somebody has to want to marry you. And this whole cultural tsunami kind of takes choice. And there was something that everybody did that meant that most people mated. And if you didn't want to, you didn't have to. Okay. There were people who didn't. But most people were doing this.
Yes.
And now some people are doing this and some people aren't. Or some people are delaying it indefinitely. And now you can really only choose between those people. Right. And we're living in a period now where the choices are getting even more atomized because your identity is everything, and you have to only marry another Republican or another Democrat or another trans person, right? Because you've so kind of individualized yourself that you're not appealing to a wider market. You're only going to appeal to a very small number of people. And in my own case, I was very attracted to punk. So I shaved my head and I wore crazy things. And of course, who are my potential mates then? Right. They're only going to be guys with mohawks and rings in their noses.
So then you would say
marriage material.
So then you would say, based upon that, because again, when I hear the idea of this is the things that we hear, like, oh, feminism gave women choice, right? And
say that
there's a lot of nuance to that.
Sorry. That's a platitude, right? Well,
yeah,
no,
of course.
Choices.
Yeah, that. Well, and I can say, not to go too much on a tangent, and this might segue into some of my questions, because I understand too that different cultures have different experiences in the West, right? So, like, I know at one point, feminism was actually largely embraced in the Black community because that was seen as the fight towards liberation, to actually have more freedoms, part of the community, and so that was deeply connected to some of the other fights for liberation. But then it became like what I've seen it now really kind of digress to is similar to what we're seeing across other cultures, right? Where it's like, oh, men have always oppressed us, or men are always this, and men are always this, and men are always doing these things. And I can say, like, specifically in like the Black American or just Black Western community in general, right? I can see the challenge with even Black feminism is it's like there isn't even a Black patriarchy that really exists in America. Like, that's not.
Well, it was destroyed. It was destroyed.
Yeah.
In the war on poverty, it was destroyed. So.
Yeah, and so like even that whole idea, that's something that I'll hear a lot of times when it's like, oh, you guys are oppressing your sisters and that. And it's like we don't even have a position of power to do that. And then secondly, as I mentioned this when we were talking earlier, where there's a lot of theories that I see being piloted today that are driving feminist ideas, and even sometimes still finding that aren't really substantiated by facts. Like, for example, I found out about this maybe a year or two ago about domestic violence, and a primary assumption is that domestic violence is unilateral. It's men, abusing women, and that is pretty much it. And when you actually look at the empirical data, you see that not only is majority of it bilateral, which it's men and women hating each other, that more often than not, women are actually initiating violence. And then I found out that lesbian relationships are actually the most violent.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And so that's just like one example of how now you have people piloting, like you said, these platitudes behind these social issues that actually aren't really there.
Yeah. And also the domestic violence would usually have been tied to an alcoholic.
Very.
Right. And granted, being married to an alcoholic is
not.
Yeah.
I interviewed.
That's usually, when you read about the violent male, he's an alcoholic.
He's an alcoholic. Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. The lady that I interviewed talked about the housewife. She talked about that and in her experience, doing the more traditional thing, but kind of growing up under that paradigm when like the patriarch has a struggle. So very interesting perspective. But there's this one thing, shout out to you, Mr. Z, where he says, please don't forget to mention patriarchy by feminist specifications. If you care to elaborate, you can feel free to do so, Mr. Z. But I think this idea that I've heard him mention, and I think it's a frustration that I've heard a lot of men mention today, which is ladies want to pick and choose the equality that they have. They didn't really want equality. They wanted the power. They wanted power. And I mentioned the dating dynamics, a prime example where it's like, we still want to be able to have our money and make our own money, but we still want you to pay for all of us. I can still have the nice office. I can still be a boss babe, but you're still paying for the vacations. You're still buying the home. You're still, planning the engagement. You're still proposing. So it's like, we want the benefits of chivalry, but we don't actually want the social contract that came with it. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's evolved into that since I was there at the beginning of the Brave New World. The message was, no, he doesn't pay. You split it.
Huh.
I was actually, I had a boyfriend for a while in Amsterdam, and he was so chivalrous that it kind of freaked me out because I was so accustomed to being treated like an equal.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think it's sort of changed. But when I first came on the scene, it was, they don't pay for anything. They don't open the door for you.
Wow.
None of that stuff.
I wonder if the economy had something to do with that shift. Or if it's having something to do with that shift.
And us is sort of inching back to the old ways, but clinging tenaciously to whatever, branch in the water they think they've got hold of, it's just a kind of a, and it's funny when people will always say the same thing. Well, you have choices now. It's about equality. It's like, how do you define those things?
How do you define that? Yeah. So, okay, real quick, there's one other thing I wanted to show you on this tip on, now this is, I mentioned to you, he's another popular space in the manosphere. I think he was arguably one of the voices that really took it mainstream. As I mentioned, he's since passed away, but I see his name and his content being referenced a ton. But what's interesting is in this clip, he's going to talk about education, and he's going to talk about particularly how white women have been taught or trained compared to Black women, and kind of referencing feminism in the different ways that it has been embraced. So I wanted to get some of your feedback on this. It's a short clip, but I thought it was pretty relevant. Okay.
Women go to college to find a man. Black women go to college.
Okay, let me see this one. Okay. His name is Kevin Samuels.
White women go to college to find a man. Black women go to college to prove they don't need one. Your mothers, our mothers failed you because your mothers are actively your competition. This is why you see women who are in their 20s partying with their daughters in their 30s and 40s. I'm sorry, on Instagram, you can have this woman and this woman. You got mother-daughter competing because if your mama ain't married, she's still dating. And if you are 25 and your mother is 41, y'all are likely looking at the same kind of men. Women have not raised their daughters. Why do we have so many women over 40 still talking about, I'm 40 and I look good, 50 and fly? Your ass should be sitting the fuck down somewhere. You should be somebody's grandma baking cookies. But instead you got the short haircut out here talking about you a diva. You can look around and it's like, oh, I'm good, I'm a diva and I'm this and that. Like, I'm 52 and I have women get angry because I don't date women my age. I'm like, I don't know.
What age group do you date?
Under 35. Because number one, I don't deal with the lack of fitness.
So that was a real quick, but he mentioned, white women are being raised to be mothers and wives. Now, what he said sound a lot different than what you heard coming up, but I'm just curious your initial thoughts.
Yeah, and actually, what I witnessed was, gosh, how would I put this? Black women were having children, and white feminists were not. I didn't know any Black feminists. I saw, when I was taking the bus to college, the girls getting on the bus from the Cabrini Green project talking about, oh, I got pregnant, now I can start collecting my welfare check. I mean, I'd hear this on the bus.
You hear this from different Black women that you're saying?
Yeah. And every, Black woman I knew had a bunch of kids already. Actually, I had one friend I worked with at my first job out of high school, Evelyn Brick House Triplet, taught me how to basically run up credit cards so you could have everything you want. Took me down to the South Side to get a fake ID. I learned a lot from her. And but one of the things that white women started doing in the 80s was becoming single mothers, which was not okay in white culture. And that's, I worked with somebody in 84 who had gotten some friend to get her pregnant, and I was just completely blown away by this.
Wow.
So it actually, in my memory, if it's sort of white culture, you did not become a single mother unless, it was the last resort. And I remember thinking, oh no, I would never do that. Diana telling me how she had this, how she got this kid. And also the relationship she was having with this kid was worrying too. It was like that kid had a mother very dependent on him. It was just the two of them. He was her lifelong friend that she had given birth to. I could see the handwriting on the wall. So there was a lot of single motherhood in the Black sphere because of the war on poverty and the welfare checks. And so and that wasn't something I was going to do. And that wasn't something, that generally a white person would do when, in the 80s, when I was in my 20s, right? But this single motherhood thing started then. And if you were married and got divorced, you would end up with the kids. That was starting in the 70s. But this, I'm going to have a baby on my own thing, that was brand new.
Okay. And you're saying that for white America, you would say that became more, it was introduced around the 80s, where it started to become more of a trend.
Yeah. I worked in this really interesting, talk about diversity. It was a very interesting, I worked in a pizza restaurant, and there were all kinds of people from all walks of life working there. There were girls from some Hispanic neighborhood whose husbands were in jail. And they got pregnant regularly. They were always pregnant. Yeah.
So I want to make sure I understand. You were saying, and again, this is really coming of age. You said that you noticed that a lot of the young white women were not having kids out of wedlock. Now, they may have been sleeping around and doing different things, sexual liberation, but it was still taboo to have kids out of wedlock. But at that time, you noticed that in the Black community, you met a lot of women who were, not only were they having kids, they were usually having kids by themselves, and that they would openly talk about how they were doing that to get a check from the government.
Yeah, I mean, that's my observation.
That was just
what I saw happening in the world around me. And then in the late 80s, it starts to become acceptable.
And the white
completely alone and have a kid if you were never married. It really was just, not something you do. I mean, I think it also might depend on social class.
Class makes plays.
So I also grew up in a place that had kind of a mix of social classes. There was some white trash there, and it was the white trash would have, Lola got pregnant right away and disappeared. Her sister got pregnant right away and disappeared. But that wasn't something that was acceptable.
Okay, it was still considered taboo for
and if you did get pregnant, like my friend, I just learned this actually about 10 years ago. My best friend in grade school had a much older sister who got pregnant and was whisked away and gave it up for adoption. And when I saw her again about 10 years ago, she had found her son and, started a relationship with him. I had absolutely no idea. So basically what went on was, and I had another friend, same thing, his sister got pregnant. She was taken away and then returned. And there was also somebody else whose older sister was really her mother, supposedly. So it was not in the open.
Very, very, very interesting. And I think that, segues into how, because that was a question that I had if you would notice that just feminism or these different ideals, if the marketing looked different to different cultures, or if you seemed like you guys were all getting the same message, but you saw it being articulated differently.
I assumed, and this is just my assumption being on the outside looking at something, I just assumed all Black women were having kids like as soon as possible. And I would actually think about this, like, why is my race sort of being told not to reproduce? And they're getting paid for it, which is how it looked to me. Like they're being encouraged by the government, and they're getting housing, and they're getting a check to have children. And I'm witnessing this. And I'm completely on my own. I'm not going to go on welfare. That's just not done. But I'm seeing, these people who, that's just the cycle of life for them. They're getting pregnant, in their teens. They're having their kids. And the messaging in the white world was, you absolutely shouldn't do that if you don't have a husband. And, these girls didn't have husbands. have you ever heard of the book, The Inhabitants, by any chance?
The Inhabitants.
It's by Julius Horowitz. He wrote two books that are very obscure, but The Inhabitants is taught in sociology classes. And it's from the perspective of a white man, social worker, who goes into the housing projects to bring the diapers to these and he part of his job is to make sure there's no man there.
Yes.
If he sees a man there, he's got to get rid of him.
Yeah. And
then you want to think about why they were doing that. There's something very sinister there.
Of course.
But, as a young person looking at the world around me, it looked to me like, oh, well, if you're Black, you have a baby and you have your children and there's no man around and you get paid from the government. But me, I'm on my own.
That's really, really, really
interesting. And we're not, and it's not clear whether you're going to get married or not. And there are no rules anymore. And I know all these girls, women my age, who are alone, who really want to get married and have kids and are very deeply angry. I remember a lot of the women I worked with at this restaurant were really angry all the time.
Because they were single?
Yeah. You couldn't just pin down a guy to get married anymore, or it was just very hard. It became very, very hard. I'm not saying that people weren't getting married or, but it became harder than it was for our mothers. Because the rules were thrown out. The end goal was thrown out.
It was completely.
You actually had to talk about it, and it wasn't necessarily going to be him who was going to talk about it. And then I wasn't supposed to want that, so I didn't know. And you also used the word settle at the beginning of this discussion. So there's also like this idea that you no longer have to settle. Well, if you don't settle, you're going to end up with nothing. You could end up with nothing. I mean, there are very few rats that make it out of the maze with everything. Right.
So you're saying it's better to settle than end up with nothing?
You never know. When I lived in Korea at the time, there was still arranged marriage, and I'll never forget this one man telling me his story about how there was something physically wrong with him when it was time for him to get married, and so the only woman he could get was this woman he thought was really ugly. And, I have to marry this really ugly woman. And he was so bitter and angry about it. And he said, and now I just can't imagine being married to anyone else. She's the most beautiful woman in the world. The way that she takes care of me, takes care of our children, blah, 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 blah. So, that's the other thing. I think there's just way too much emphasis on superficial, and especially in your generation. Like, I could never internet date. I think it's something so inorganic about growing up, and you're looking the person up and down. I'll never forget, like, the few times I tried doing that, it was just like,
no.
So
it's not for everybody.
Soulless. At least, and I'm not saying that I was looking for mates in the best places, but I certainly learned how to flirt and talk to guys and have a good time, but this presenting yourself as a possible piece of merchandise, that you've met online, and because you're saying, oh, am I going to want to have another date with this person? And you're meeting them and sizing them up right away, as opposed to bumping into them in a bar, talking, and maybe that guy who isn't really attractive at first glance becomes more attractive the longer you talk, which is an experience I had many times, thinking someone was ugly, and then with time they actually became much more attractive to me.
How do you think on that? Because you mentioned something. How do you think feminism reconciles with hypergamy? I'm not sure if you're familiar with hypergamy.
Oh yes, I know all about hypergamy. Yeah. I'm a master hypergamist myself.
Okay. Yeah. But if you think about it, the fully empowered, financially well-off, highly educated woman who's only considering men for marriage, who are in better positions than them.
Well, hypergamy is also you're married and then you leave your spouse for somebody better, or you're in a relationship and you go running off with the deer with the bigger antlers, right? I mean, that's also probably biologically wired. And I would say in some ways, because women now go to work generally first, you can hypergamy all you want. But when you are dependent on him, you had 5 kids and you're dependent on him, you're not going anywhere.
But do you think hypergamy is feasible, or do you think it's an illusion?
No, I think it's real. I've done it. I've thought it.
I
know it. When I started going down into the manosphere rabbit hole and learning all of this terminology, I applied it to myself. Absolutely. I can admit to that.
Okay.
Yes.
So you think that that's something that is innate to women, even if they claim to be the most radical feminist, that there's still something in them that's going to want to try to go for the bigger and the better?
I think feminism actually put hypergamy in overdrive.
Really? How? In what capacity?
Because on the one hand, you don't have to depend, you don't have 5 kids, right? And a husband who's providing for you. Now you have 1 kid, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And, you see this hot guy in the shop down the street and you get the hots for him, right? Now there isn't any moral approbation for ditching the husband and getting with the other guy, right? That moral code has been dispensed with. And that's feminism. Feminism basically blurred the boundaries and allowed for all of that. And also it kind of inculcates in women this idea that you deserve, you deserve better. You should get what you deserve, And I was thinking about this before we got online. I was thinking about the marriages that I saw growing up.
Yes.
And how everyone wound up with someone, in my world, everyone. And how they did seem to match.
Yes. Yes.
I couldn't imagine Mrs. Murray without Mr. Murray,
Mm-hmm.
They looked like my parents actually didn't look like they belonged together. Mine were, but they also sort of made the best out of it. They made the best out of it.
So somebody married up, I guess, I'm assuming.
I think yeah, my dad was very enamored with my mother. You know, my mother actually was. My mother didn't marry my father, by the way. And that's also a very long story. So women have always had control over that. You know, I'm really surprised that I'm not angrier at her for that, because she had been dating my father for quite some time. It's not like she couldn't tell him. I don't know why she didn't.
Huh.
And this other guy that she did marry who wasn't really her type. My biological father was much more her type. I just don't understand it. I'll never get a straight answer out of her about why she did that. I've met my biological father, and the first thing he said to me was, "Why didn't she tell me?" And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know.
So you're saying your mom, so you're saying like the dad that you grew up with?
It wasn't my dad, and I was told that he was.
Oh.
And they put on a good show. But my dad, let's say my father, my dad really was chasing after her at work. And this is the other thing that feminism has done. You know, now it's like you can't date somebody at work anymore. So how is anybody supposed to meet anybody if you can't flirt? If your sexual harassment is always looming in a dark closet somewhere.
Right.
You know, both my real father and my dad, she met at work. And my dad was just absolutely mad for her, and she said, well, you know, she went out on a date with him, I think because my father was dealing with some problem with his family. And she said, well, you know, I'm pregnant. And he said, oh, I want to marry you anyway. I'll love it as if it were my own, or something like that. So she just married this other guy.
And you find that out just randomly?
Well, how would I put this? I don't look anything like my dad.
Okay. The dad that you grew up with.
Don't look like my siblings. And so, you know, it's funny. I didn't think about it very much, but one of my earliest memories is my dad and I are in the car going somewhere, and he said, you know what a bastard is? And I said, what? And he said, oh, it's what you could have been if I didn't save you. And I filed that away as a beautiful thing, that my father rescued me from something. I mean, I was too young to fully understand it, but I never forgot him saying that to me.
Wow.
And then when I was 16, my mother threw a picture in my face and said, you know, this is your real father. And you know how I know for sure? Because you're a drunk and so was he, or something like that. Yeah. Wow. I mean, and now with feminism, here we are. I mean, it's even in overdrive, because the man has almost no say whether she's going to have the child or not. You know, she has all of the control pretty much.
Well, and this is why some men are just walking away entirely.
And then after you get married and have a kid, then they say, oh, you know, I don't want to do this anymore. Right. And then he ends up paying child support. I saw a documentary years ago that really set me off thinking about this. It was this couple, they had, say, 3 kids, and this woman is working class, living in this apartment, just the bare bones, like no furniture really, working some, you know, low hourly wage kind of job. And then meeting the father in a parking lot somewhere to hand the kids over for his time with them. And they seem to still get along. And I'm thinking, why are they divorced? And then they each married somebody else, and it got even more expensive because they were taxed more or something. It just made absolutely no sense. And I think that's the other thing. And I think the hypergamy is driving it. Somebody was quibbling with whether the data on that women are the ones who file for divorce more than
yes, that is.
And the criticism was, well, maybe the women are just filing the paperwork. You know, it's not necessarily that they're instigating the divorce. They're just the ones who are filing the paperwork. But I would believe that it's the women who are instigating the divorce.
And why would you believe that?
hypergamy.
Oh, so you think that so are you suggesting that, okay, hypergamy being an overdrive because women have more I don't want to say more agency, but they're just in more spaces than they were before, and the social contract has been deconstructed.
Yeah, and I would say this is grossly generalizing. But I would say, based on everything I've read and observed, my synthesis is that men will have affairs, but they can compartmentalize better than women because they're wired differently. So I would say that a man has a better mastery of having it as an affair, but because women are wired to bond, if the woman has the affair, she isn't going to be able to separate, and then that's what instigates the divorce.
Oh, interesting.
I would say, generally speaking, men have probably, had their dalliances. I know my mother told me my grandfather did. But no way would he have left my grandmother. Absolutely not. And I was actually very surprised to learn that he had an affair with the girl who worked at the carnival. Wow. Throw the softballs at the clown doll thing. But it was an affair. So I would say, generally speaking, males are much better equipped to say, well, that's this. If the woman has sex recreationally, it's just not going to be recreational.
I have harder. I have long asserted that a woman who is sexually loose or promiscuous is going to have a lot more problems than a man who does the same thing. I mean, I'm not for, just lack of sexual discipline anyways. Like I've talked to women about, celibacy, and I think that could be a great, beautiful thing and all that stuff. But I'm like, if someone is going to engage in like casual sex or whatever, I'm a firm believer that it can impact women, at least from an emotional standpoint, not as much as men, just because even if you look at like historically, like literally historically, you have whole societies that are built off of, polygamy and men having multiple wives. And I mean, that's different, obviously, than you just kind of sleeping around. But I'm just saying it's like men biologically also are wired or like wired differently. Women are receivers. So it's like if you're like receiving all of this material from all these different men, I mean, to me, I'm like, that's going to mess up something emotionally, your pH balance. Something's going to be messed up at some point.
Yeah, because it changes your hormonal makeup, and then you stop thinking about them. But they're able to stop thinking about it and keep doing what they need to do. I don't think they get nearly as consumed by it, and they're much better able to go, that's the one that I do this with on Tuesdays or what have you.
Yeah.
There was something I wanted to add to that. I can't remember.
No worries. Shout out to you, Emerald Edge with the 10. Appreciate you. Hey, what's going on, Dr. Tiasan? It's so good to see you. Says I'm a half hour behind, but congrats to Shay for her ongoing incredible work. Again, thank you guys for those of you who are showing support. I definitely appreciate it.
That go the money.
I remembered what it was now.
Okay.
There was also a much stronger sense of the family as a unit. So if you strayed, you still were not going to break up your family. And also you were living in more of an extended family kind of situation. There were far more people involved. So if you got a divorce, it wasn't just going to affect your little family, your little 3 people family. It would have affected a much wider circle of people. So I think that in the older model, if he had an affair, or even if she did, because they weren't having sex anymore, they've been married 40 years, they would still not break up the family.
That's true.
But now it's like, it's just okay to do that, and I would say if we're going to solve this problem, which was an earlier question, we really need to rethink our values. A lot of this freedom is creating a very chaotic, disordered, and I would say dissatisfied and unhappy society. And I'm not going to say I'm unhappy, you know, because of the choices that I've made. I own them. I think I made a lot of bad ones. And I think that the conflicts of interest made it almost impossible for me to decide exactly what I was going to do. So I just wound up going, whoa. But you know, we no longer, I mean, not everybody, but it seems that it's just not as sacrosanct as it used to be for a variety of reasons. And so, yeah, now I'm done with him and I'm on to the next thing. This isn't good for kids.
And would you say, because I mean, you know, hindsight's 2020, everybody can look back at some point in their life and say, I would have done better. If there were if you could maybe choose, I don't know, 2 or 3 things that you would maybe tell your younger self or advise women who are actively embracing feminism as the gospel truth, what would that be? What would you advise the women who are looking to go down the same road that you did?
Well, I would say you can still have a career. You don't need to put that first. Find a good man. Don't think of it as settling, because the man who wants you is probably going to be a good man. You know, that's also it. He's going to pick you probably, and you're going to be okay with it or not. So basically it was always the women who said, yeah, you know, he's coming after her. And she's like, nah. She still has the ultimate control. Mm-hmm. So if he is chasing after you, he's probably going to love you for the rest of your life.
If he's putting in that pursuit.
Yes. And, you know, don't think of it as settling, because this is somebody who's going to cherish you and protect you and, you know, give you the opportunity to have children and do it as soon as possible. There's plenty of time to have a career. You can go to college when the kids are in school, and you can have it all. I don't really see it as an either or thing, which is the big mistake that I made.
The either or.
And also the other thing is that I think we jump onto the divorce train far too easily. There are so many reasons for getting divorced that just don't seem like permanent problems. No human being is always an asshole. Yeah. I mean, I guess some people are, but you know what I mean? It's like, and I'm just saying also, I went through something with my significant other. It was awful. We went through a very, very bad time. And now things are just sort of humming along. You know, I was thinking of leaving. And, I went out on a date with somebody else, and it felt so weird. It really felt like, you know, and all of my friends are telling me, yeah, you have to get out. And your girlfriends are going to tell you that too. Female friends friends are the biggest danger on the planet. Like, really.
Well, you said female who?
Female friends. Like they will always take your side to dump him. You know, I was, you know, I think you might remember from that interview I did with Leslie, I was the only female friend with this one friend who was saying, no, don't leave your husband. Don't do that. That would be stupid. He is doing a lot, and you should respect that. And then later she told me, you know, everyone was encouraging her to dump this guy who was working all the time. And I know you talked about that in your response video. And and I find female friends are more inclined to push you in that direction. And it was my male friends, actually, when I first got together with my partner, it was one of my gay male friends. I was saying, you know, and he's kind of nuts. And he's kind of like, he goes, you know, people aren't always
good.
No, you know, like it might be adjusting to living with you. There are things that could be going on with him. He's used to living like this, and now he's living like this, and things will probably take a little while to settle down. Plus, he's from a different culture, so it's always my male friends who were like much more about give this person a chance, wait it out. It could change. Whereas I notice that there's this idea that things are static. Like this person is a drug addict, right? What do you think, he's going to be a drug addict for 70 years, for 80 years, right? You think this is a completely impossible situation? That, I mean, yes, sometimes it is. So I know somebody who actually, they were both addicted to heroin. Yeah. She got pregnant, and he was the one who said, let's have it. That way we'll get off this drug. So they had the kid, and for a while, they were coming off of the drug. They were on methadone, and he was actually doing really well, but then he had a relapse, and shooting in front of the kid, caught him shooting up in the bedroom, and she kicked him out. So I'm not saying it's always going to work out, but I've just noticed that there's more inclination to not believe that you can see your way through something. Yes. Because we're cutting and running so quickly.
Yes, always the idea, and I think you alluded to this in your another interview that I saw you do, always this idea that all you have to do is just swipe and there's someone else better.
Yeah.
You leave this, you leave that, you go over there. As soon as you're unhappy, as soon as that person isn't filling your needs or whatever, then there's going to be somebody else who does.
Right. Or you're not happy. Right. So I was getting my hair cut, millennials cutting my hair, maybe Gen Z. And she's asking me questions, and I was in a kind of a sour mood, and I'm like, oh, we haven't walked out the door together in 15 years, which is true, actually. And she's like, oh, you're not happy. You have to get out of there, And I was just thinking, what does happy mean? What does that mean? I would say if I was unhappy, it was more to do with working so many hours, not necessarily him. But it's certainly not ideal. It's not ideal, but maybe it is. I mean, there are times when I think, actually this is ideal. I am independent, but I live with somebody.
Yeah.
I do whatever I want. He lets me go wherever I want. He never bothers me. There's always somebody to take care of the cats when I go someplace. I've written a lot more since we moved in together. Actually, kind of interesting, because when I was on my own, it was hard to focus on my writing because I was constantly trying to survive. Yeah, you talked about that in your response, about how you need a space and you need to feel secure. And and I was like, yes, that's exactly my story. It wasn't really until I moved in with my significant other that I was able to kind of calm down and feel safe enough to write.
The creative, because that creative space as a writer, you need a level of like resolve or peace in order to allow those creativity to really kick in. So,
but I would also say that's different for women. That's something that women need. Men, the men, a lot of the male writers I know, they basically didn't live anywhere and worked in a janitor's closet and ate peanut butter sandwiches until they got their book done. I was like, no way could I do something like that. But a lot of them did that. So they just, they don't have the same needs as women.
They have a lot less. I'm a firm believer, and this, of course, isn't every man, right? Not every man, but I think by and large, men have more of the ability to rough it and to do with a lot less material benefits, and they'll be fine. They're just not as easily moved by those kinds of circumstances in the way women are, which is why when I'm seeing this trend of van life and I'm seeing this trend of women trying to promote that as a form of liberation, I'm like, there's a lot of capping going on, because I know that goes against the female desire to feel safe and secure and protected. And now you have these ladies out here who are fending for themselves, right? And that kind of connects to another, tenet of feminism that we had touched upon before we went live, which is I think one of the negativities of feminism is that it has given some women the illusion that not only can they do it by themselves, that they should do it by themselves, and that to be the most efficient, to be the most progressive, modern woman who's going to make everything of themselves, right? You talked about teachers who were like putting ideas in your head very young, like, oh, you're going to do something better than having kids. You're going to do something better than having a family. So this idea that, the pinnacle of me being a woman is me being able to be self-sustaining and have this money or have this great career, and that's just not the reality for the majority of Americans in particular. Like, I want to say, I know in Black America, your average Black woman makes, I think, around like $44,000. I think it's a little different in white America and some other cultures, but I'm like, by and large, your average American lives paycheck to paycheck. And so that is not really the kind of boss babe, Sex in the City, you know what I mean, narrative that is oftentimes being portrayed. Like, a lot of ladies aren't living like that. And it's becoming more and more, or it seems more and more of necessity that people do things together.
Yeah. Well, if you want to build wealth, and it really wasn't until I got with my current partner that I got out of debt, wrote a book, and saved up some money.
Well,
because we pool our resources to a certain extent, and that's how people did it. And now you're being told that you have to do all of this stuff on your own. And also, you're afraid to, I'm assuming that if I were Gen Z, I would be afraid to get married to somebody if my parents got divorced and then invest in a house with that person. What a mess that would be. And one thing that I saw also was, the divorce train really starts in the 70s. And so by the time we come of age, like one of my friends married somebody who was divorced, and he wanted a prenup like you wouldn't believe. And she was crying about this, like, I don't get anything. I wouldn't get anything. What does he think of me? Well, this man is already. It turns out, he felt damaged by his first wife, but actually, he was the problem.
Oh. Okay.
But that's the other thing, right? So you're marrying somebody who's already been married to somebody else. Mm-hmm. There's already a feeling. It's not like the person died; they're just divorced, right? Yeah. So there's already a feeling of impermanence. Mm-hmm. So how confident can you be in investing in other things besides this person? It's a big ask. Because because we've thrown out the loyalty. Look, once you make this promise, you stick to it.
Well, and here's the thing. Of course, I'm always a supporter. I'm supporter of marriages within certain contexts. I don't think you should just get married, But I'm a supporter of, marriage and building families. But, even outside of a man and a woman getting together and pulling the resources together, just on a basic level of like financial survival, I'm like, it's getting to the point where people are going to have to, I feel like pair up. We're going to have to pair up. And I've heard this idea of there might be some who in their pride would rather be homeless and would rather do the van life or live in the car thing than acknowledge that they would be better off working alongside a man, or acknowledge that they actually can't do things by themselves. Like, you're going to have a subset of women who are so dedicated to holding on to that illusion that they'll hold on to it, kicking and screaming,
Well, also, why is it that so many women are saying that that the men aren't good enough? And then I was just watching a Manosphere video, and the men were saying the women aren't good enough. Right. So both sides are looking at the other side and saying, I don't know what happened to them, but I'm not picking any of them. And the men are saying it's because the women are too entitled. What they really want, and I was listening to this conservative podcaster. I'm thinking, Matt Walsh, maybe,
I'm familiar.
He's saying, you know what men want? They want to get married. They want to be fathers. They want to have children, but they also want a feminine
counterpart
woman who recognizes her role. And interestingly enough, when I was in this business partnership and this friend was advising me, he said, and also I wound up in a legal battle, the lawyer said, you need to know what your roles are. No business works out if you don't know what your role is. Okay, so there's the 51-49, but you also have to define the roles. And so we threw that out because that's not equal, supposedly, except I think it really was, because you knew what your role was. And if you think about it, now we have a society that's in chaos because nobody knows
who's doing what.
Yeah.
What is a woman? What is a man? And what does it even mean?
Right. They want somebody who's like, if we get married, I'm going to happily have some children and I'm going to take care of this and you're going to take care of that. And that's how it's going to go. And I'm not going to leave you for the guy at the gas station or whatever,
I will say this real quick. I do believe that when chaos unfolds, or when there's an emergency, everybody knows who the man is. Like when things are nice and that the finances are well, economy's going good, people have their jobs or whatever, like when things are well, then there's a space to try to be theoretical or philosophical and say, oh, what really is a woman or not? But I'm like, when it's chaos and there's war, everybody's looking to the man and being like, y'all need to man up.
Yeah.
Like I think about this, if there's something goes wrong in a family, God forbid, maybe there's a financial challenge or something happens to a child or whatever, like people are going to look like, where's the father? 9 times out of 10, where's the father? And then even if it's a single mother, there's going to be more empathy, like, oh, single mother, the dad should have been around and she's just doing the best that she can. But if it's a single father, it's like, oh, well, he should have. But I'm like, I feel like when it comes to responsibilities, this is just my theory, when it comes to the responsibilities, when it comes to emergencies, like the things that are needed to keep a thing going, no one ever questions the role of the man. It's always assumed that the man is supposed to be there. When it's war, we're not going to be asking who the men are. What's a woman? What's a man? Like, you're going to be like, if you're a man, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, maybe with the gender law, things might be changing, but I could definitely see biological women resisting that and being like, no, I'm a woman. I should
hiding. No, really. That's actually what my essay is about. It's if there is somebody falls on the subway tracks, it's not a woman jumping in there to grab the person off the tracks. It never ever is.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what's so funny. There was a faculty meeting where they were trying to the women I work with were talking about what they were going to do if they saw someone harassing our Chinese national students on the street. This was during the coronavirus thing.
Yes.
Because there was Asian hate everywhere, supposedly. And, and I was just laughing. I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, you're really, first of all, there was a certain type of sort of schizophrenic person usually who was harassing them. And Elizabeth, you're gonna grab this guy and wrestle him to the ground. Sure.
Elizabeth.
And there was
name like that. I'm sorry.
This moment too when I said something like, what we really need to do is just give them the tools. So, how do you handle yourself on the street? Like, for example, you don't look the crazy person in the eye because that'll get them on you. And then one of the millennials, she said, oh, I'm always looking at people and smiling at them. And I said, yeah, and that's how your blonde hair ends up in a ditch. No, and I shouldn't laugh at my own jokes, but that's the other thing. There's a complete and utter disconnect from how dangerous the world really is because men made it really, really, really safe.
Well,
and now women are wandering around with this illusion that it's so safe and that oh, just being nice will make this person behave the right way towards you is just completely divorced from reality.
Yeah, I can't get over the fact that Elizabeth was over there trying to decide how she.
Yeah, I'm gonna be there, you know, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. I said, I'm not. Like,
absolutely not.
No. I'm not getting involved. Sorry.
Oh gosh. Well, this has been a really insightful conversation. I know we've gone a little longer than I anticipated, but I think we've covered off a lot of different things. Is there anything in particular, any subject, any thought, any idea that you think the audience should know? Something you would like to mention that you haven't already mentioned?
I would just say that if you really are thinking these feminists, you want to go down the feminist road, why not just embrace what you are and the wonderful things that women have done throughout human history? One thing I like to ask my students, when you go to a foreign country, what is it you think of first? They all say the food. Who made the food? Who created the food across the world that when you go to China and you try all of their wonderful dishes, it was the women who created the food that represents the country. And that is usually the representative cultural artifact.
For sure.
And, you know, now we're in this era when the food is all pre-packaged and artificial and fake, and you know, we've lost some of these things that women contributed because we devalued those things. And why women devalued their own contribution and their own special peculiar capacities is, you know, is going to be one for the history books.
And you would say that it was women that stood up one day and said, oh, it's not good enough being at home. You think you would argue?
Well, you know, you don't have to get pregnant now, you can control it. So now I can live like a man, and now everything, and slowly but surely everything becomes more about being like men and taking over the masculine world. And abandoning the matriarchal world that used to exist separately.
So you do think there was a matriarchal world
absolutely.
in existence at the same time there was a patriarchy?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's BS that there was a patriarchy. There was a matriarchy, it was the home. And then there was a patriarchy outside the home. And the women ran the community, and they created a sense of community. And there were all these things that women were doing that are now left undone. And one of the most resonant comments I've seen in my travels online, somebody wrote, women are derelict in their duty to humanity.
Interesting. So your argument is that both had positions of power, they just knew their place. But now when women, in an effort to be like men, they, I guess, focused on that, they have left undone their actual primary place of power, right? Like that no longer is. It's left undone, and now it's to put it.
And we can go back to the millennial wondering, you know, feeling sorry for her mother because she has to take care of her father with dementia. And I'm just thinking, you know, that is such a valuable, I know it's a pain in the ass and it's really hard, and, you know, but people need to be taken care of. They need care.
Of course.
And I don't think women have stopped caring. It's just that where they're applying it is outside of, you know, the sphere. And now we're farming people off to, you know, as one of my friends said, bin the old people and put them away, and they're no longer part of the, you know, part of this scenery. I mean, you know, I'm not saying this work is pleasant, but neither is being a coal miner, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's like choose your heart. Would you rather like risk your life? You know what I mean?
Rather somebody was there for you when you needed them. You know, you like you said, you being encouraged to do the van life and do everything on your own, but there's going to be a time when you need somebody
to
take care of you.
And that's the part that you said when you've talked to younger millennials, when you've talked to Gen Z, that they have a hard time conceptualizing that there's going to be a time when they're that person that needs to be taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't think about that. No. They just assume. I don't know what they're assuming. Are they assuming that just somehow magically things are going to align and it's going to happen, that the government's going to take care of them, that there's going to be systems that, like, I wonder does their brain just stop working when those things come up? I mean, I wonder, or if it just seems so far off. They're like, I'll figure it out when I get closer. Then you wait. Mm-hmm.
I think part of the reason why it's so hard to conceptualize is if you don't have children, time doesn't move in the same way.
Okay.
So you're kind of not aware of dependence and need, human needing another human. And, it just seems like some long protracted adolescence that you're in. So you don't really have a firm grasp on, the cycles of life. And honestly, they've been broken anyway, right? I mean,
yes, they have with the,
I haven't held a baby. When I was a kid, I was always holding babies. I was around babies all the time. I knew how to take care of them. I have only held a baby maybe 3 times in my adult life.
Wow. And you would say that was by choice, or are you looking?
No, it's just, that's the way the world that I'm, I've almost never around children. There's something deeply unnatural about that.
And you would say, and even with like you're growing up, like the friends that you were around, family, you didn't have like family that was getting married or having kids that you were around enough where that they would at least be. Well, like all of your friends or the people you were hanging around were all kind of existing in that space.
Basically, there were my 5 best friends from high school. 3 of us are childless.
Okay.
One had 2 children, but she moved to another state.
Okay.
And then the other one, I wasn't speaking to her while she had a kid. We reconnected years later, but she only had 1 kid.
Okay.
And she said there were no kids where she was raising him. There were no kids. She had to put an ad in the paper to find a kid.
No way.
To play with. Yeah, and this would have been in the late 80s.
Oh, no way.
Yes. And another friend of mine who's living in Cape Cod told me that the only kids are immigrants from South America in the town. There are no other kids in this town on Cape Cod. So yeah, I mean, it just sort of, so anybody that I not so many of my friends had kids, but I didn't live in the same place.
Okay, that makes sense. And then also too, I mean, you said you're in the city, like there are certain environments that by nature of just the culture there, you're probably not going to see as many kids. Like if you were in, I don't know, maybe East Texas or something where people get married.
Yeah.
They get married, you might see more.
But even then, it seems so odd to me. If I go out, I might see children. It's like, whoa, there are children around here, but it's not like the way it was when I grew up, when kids were everywhere. It was just part of the social fabric. You were always around children, and I was always around babies. And it's just not, I did have a friend though, this one friend who had the kid when they would get off the drive. I actually was with her and her son a lot for a period of time. She lived above me, and that's like the closest I got to child rearing.
And it also, what's so fascinating about this is you started off by talking about how you growing up in the time where sexual liberation, sexual revolution was at its pinnacle, right? Or really taking off, and how a lot of young girls are using it as birth control. And then now fast forward, many of those, used to be young girls, perhaps are now older women who are not finding, they can't find the kids. Mm-hmm. And maybe at the time they're not being that understanding that there's repercussions to like continuing to delete babies and different things and like going down that road. Like there's actually a byproduct of that, but they don't talk about those things when they're promoting the freedom of sleeping around and all that stuff.
Right. That's a good point. So if I had any other advice, it would be don't get an abortion.
Yeah. You preaching to the choir there. I don't rock with that.
Get married, have it.
Yeah. I mean, if it's that bad,
have confidence in yourself. you know, have some faith.
That's so. I wish there was more study or work on that, as far as really looking at how the sexual liberation movement, how it's impacted the birth rate, or the lack thereof. Because it's what you mentioned at the beginning, where you're just like, how you saw feminism being embodied within white America versus the Black community. But now even the Black community, the birth rate is below replacement. So it's hit multiple communities, that ideology. So really, really, really interesting stuff.
Yeah. And why? What was the end goal of, wherever this came from, and why?
I mean, I don't want to go on a what is it? Conspiratorial tangent, but I mean, there have been obvious. I think Bill Gates, for example, has been very obvious about his desire to curb the population and different things. There's been different people in positions of power who have openly expressed concern about a growing population. And sometimes I look at this and I'm just like, okay, so was this really a part of that? Was this like people in power being like, oh, we want these resources, we think there's too many people, so we're going to start promoting these things? Like, was that I think so.
I do think so. Have you seen the documentary Birth Gap?
No, and now that sounds like I'm gonna have to add that. You've given me multiple things to add to my list.
And there's another book I can recommend also. It's called The End of Woman. It's by, I think, Carrie Gress.
Okay.
I would highly recommend that, because she does go into the possible political underpinnings of why this sort of was pushed on people.
And
why it was engineered.
And it's interesting, you really only see this problem in cultures that are more Western or have taken on more modern ideals. You don't see this as much in Latin America, and in Africa, they're still having kids, it seems like every minute. Like,
actually watch Birth Gap. When I was living in South Korea, I remember sitting there one day and I was like, why do I feel like I'm in the 1950s? It was an uncanny moment. It was familiar, but it wasn't familiar. And I realized that there were all these mothers dressed up with their children, preciously dressed up, and there were children everywhere. And I kind of was sitting there alone, thinking, this really looks kind of nice. Like, I kind of wish I could just take my beautifully dressed baby to the shopping center, and instead I'm on some great adventure, right? And it's lonely as hell. And I'm just to say, I have regrets, but my life went the way it did, and I have had a very interesting life in a lot of ways. And there are many things I can't complain about, but they now have such a low birth rate that they're in danger of going extinct within 100 years, and the same with Japan. So this data analyst or data scientist, Dr. Stephen Shaw, discovered this. It wasn't even like he had a theory and he confirmed his bias with the data. He discovered that the birth rate is way too low, and that a lot of women turned out to be unintentionally childless because they were waiting too long. And then by the time they thought they were ready, and that's the other thing, there's just such a denial of biological reality. If you want to get married, you've got to be looking for a husband in your early 20s when you're at your peak.
Yes. And that goes against the advice that was told to you.
Right. No, I was always, and if they weren't attracted to me when I was 40, that was their fault. right? Because men are so objectifying.
They're too visual. So
Yeah.
men are too, what is it that say men are so shallow and misogynistic and, you know, they're so short-sighted, but then we will turn around and judge a man if he doesn't have a particular job or isn't making X amount of money. Or even if he is making the money, but he doesn't have the status, he doesn't have the degree from the particular college, then we will literally judge him for the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, I always realized that it was me who was shallow. They were actually far more practical. I was like, he's handsome. I want that. And he'd be like, wait a minute.
That's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well that yeah, you've given me a lot of different things for me now to look over. This has been a really interesting conversation. We covered up a lot of different topics. I thank you, again, for sharing your perspective, your point of view, and I believe giving, just an honest depiction that I think some people are honestly scared to acknowledge or admit. As I mentioned at the beginning of this live, I think that there's so much pressure on women sometimes having to save face and having to keep the illusion live versus being like, actually, no, I don't know that this is really all it's cracked up to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed talking with you too, and I've enjoyed watching your other videos. And
yeah, absolutely. You're welcome on anytime. And this is really, really, really good stuff.
Sure, I'll come back. Just say the word.
Yeah. You guys be sure to check out, you said you're on Substack, right? You're on Substack.
Yeah, it's Notes from the Underdog.
Okay, you know what? I'll put the description in the, or I'll put your Substack in my description if you guys want to go check out our Substack. You said you're working on 2 books, both of which sound really interesting.
I'm trying to sell the novel right now, and and I'm going to serialize my Requiem for the Patriarchy book on Substack. So the next essay coming up is Patriarchy Porn, Panic in Year Zero. Men, something to do with letting the man lead if you're going to survive.
Letting the man lead, yeah. So you guys be sure to check it out. Shout out to Malarkey. It says this has been a really engrossing conversation, ladies, and it isn't too late to donate to the Shea Charday Church Pot folks. Appreciate you, Malarkey. Malarkey is literally one of my most, 40 months, one of my most dedicated members. I really appreciate Malarkey. Always good things to say, always good things to share, and always showing support. So I appreciate you. And again, thank you so much, Darleen, for just sharing some things, offering perspective, offering even your anecdotal experience and the different things that you've noticed is, I think, really intriguing. And, I would hope that young girlies or women who are coming of age who are falling right in, hook, line, and sink with feminism could look back now and also look at it from a more critical point of view and then decide if this is the life that they want. Because I believe women, I don't have a problem with women having a choice. So as far as I'm concerned, the idea of women having a choice, it's no problem with me. I just think a lot of what we have going on right now is more programming. It's programming and it's propaganda. Women thinking that they're having a choice, but they're actually believing a lie. And then they come to a certain part of their life and they're like, wait, this is not what I thought it was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. And for women, it's too late pretty soon. It really can be too late. You blink and it's too late. It really goes very fast.
Too late pretty soon. Men can pretty much start over at any point. They really can.
They can have children anytime.
Yeah. I know one of my friends just retired, met a young, cute Thai girl, 20 years a senior. He's 20 years younger than him, or 25 years younger than him, got remarried and living a brand new life.
Yep.
Happy as can be. And I'm like, I'm not even mad at it. And I was laughing and I was thinking about that because I'm like, I can think of countless men in my life who I knew maybe their 20s and their 30s. They were struggling, going through different things, were in and out of jail, just having a really hard time in life. And then they eventually were just like, okay, you know, I need to get my stuff together. And they were able to do it and move on and get married and still have a business and still have children. You know what I mean? Like so men have to move. Well, in that sense, again, it's not, the genders aren't equal. Men, they do have a lot more leverage. And I think we should just be an acceptance of that.
Yeah, you know, you remind me, you know, in my own family, there are 4 kids, 2 girls, 2 boys. The girls are childless, boys have kids.
Really?
In my very female-dominated workplace, most of the women are childless, and the few men who are there have kids. Unless they're gay. There are a couple gay guys, but the ones that are straight
have kids.
So it's the women who are ending up with nothing. And the men they still somehow, in many cases, make their way around. But then you also have the men going their own way movement and the ones who aren't touching it, right? But if men manage to get through the maze with everything, and then all these women are left over.
Yeah. And then you have the incels, right? You know, you have those who are going to say, there's men who are just, they're not getting anything, right? Those who feel like they're left over. So you're going to have that population. But I understand what you're saying. Like at any point, there's not the same restraint of time biologically on men that there is women. That's just not debatable.
Yeah, but the women who are left over are incels too, in a sense. It's
incels. They call them.
They're all these people who are unmated because the women think they can do better than these guys over here, and they're not willing to commit and just make a life with this man and turn it into something.
Which is why, going back to what you said about hypergamy, I don't know that I think it does work. I mean, it might work as far as women trying out different options, but does that mindset lead to the long-lasting, stable, secure homes that make up a thriving society? No. I think a woman who leads with that mindset or follows that mindset can actually end up with nothing if they are not able to properly identify the kind of man who's a keeper. Yeah. If they think, okay, he's good, yeah, he makes good money, but he's short, so I'm gonna let him go. Or like I have this thing I'm doing right now where I'm relationship consulting, and I'm doing these different interviews with a lot of like Gen Zs, and they're coming in. I'm taking inventory, nothing crazy, just hearing their mind. It's hearing like, okay, what have you experienced in the dating market? Like, what's interesting to you? What are your preferences? And so I hear, quite frankly, just what I frankly believe to be just a lot of insanity. You know, some are just like, oh, I just wanted a partner for every season, because, you know, partners may be here seasonally. So maybe you have a partner for summer, then you have a partner for spring, you have a partner for when you're in college, a partner really. So it's this idea of just, you know, just relationships are transition, you know, transitory. And I'm like, okay. And then you have some who they're like, that's like, okay, dabbling with polyamory, but then you're queer, but then you want a long-lasting relationship, but then aren't totally sure when. So it's like,
there's this idea that time is just forever.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's like kind of what you talked about was and I don't know if it's the amount of choice that they give makes it impossible for someone to be able to choose, or creates a reality in which it's hard for someone to actually recognize the good thing that's in front of them, because they're always distracted by, well, this choice over there, that over there. Well, you could be poly one day, you could be pans, you could be straight for a moment, then you could do casual. Then once you're done doing all that, then you could settle down. Like, if the idea of there always being choices can keep these ladies tapping into that hypergamy, always trying to find a better choice, but then that never leads to anything stable.
Right. And there's also this issue where if there's slight defect, they're out of there, right? There's this idea that you're supposed to have this perfect person who's got to be everything to you, which is the other issue. You know, it's expecting way too much out of one person.
Right. Right.
And I saw women, the millennials they were posting a lot about their online dating. And I wanted to just reach through the screen and grab them. Like, this guy is not going to ask you out again. This is not going to work. Who do you think you are? First of all, you're not all that. Okay. Right there. You're not a stunning beauty. So seriously, I saw some of the demands that she was making in her bio on this online. I'm just like behind the scenes going, behind her back, looking at this phone. You're like, as far as I know, she's still single. That's 15 years ago, like, wait, you gotta have this, you gotta have this. And I'm like, you got a body like a football player. You're not. Here's another one. And actually, because part of my story too was, I can just go out and get them. No, you gotta let them call you. You just have to. I read this book called The Rules, and it wasn't until I read this stupid book when I was 37 years old that I started getting some traction, because it tells you all the wrong things. You got to let him call you. You can't call him. You can't control it. You got to let him decide. It's just the way it works. I don't think you're ever going to be able to change that,
Well, I think innately when men are attracted to attractive women. They're attractive. Men, heterosexual men, straight men are attracted to feminine women. So if you walk around like you said, you're like a scary radical feminist, and you just look mean. Like, if you just first of all look mean, no man wants to approach a woman that looks mean and gives off like just a rude energy,
or who's going to treat him like her oppressor. It's
not
attractive.
I think in this society, women have forgot how to be women, quite frankly, in pursuit of all these other ideas that really lead down nowhere, rabbit hole towards nothing. That like basic femininity seems like a far off goal. I mean, that's something that you're supposed to be taught, or at least, not only say taught, that's something that's supposed to be nurtured since you're a little girl. Just, to where these things become natural. Like, what a man is, what a woman, like, it's just not even up for grabs. But because, again, so much of the stuff has been convoluted. I mean, the fact that you even have to have a femininity coach, quite frankly, to me is more of an indication of how the ways in which the family structure was broken down.
Well, it's sort of interesting. I'm listening to this conservative say, we want feminine women, and I'm thinking, I know so many people who would be outraged to hear something like that, right? How dare he say that?
No, you absolutely would. But I would find it refreshing sometimes too when I'm able to leave America and I go to other cultures where gender norms are still very much intact. And that's not to say that they don't have other challenges, but it just makes life so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes it so easy. Men should be men, women should be women. I'm like, wow, imagine that. Like, I make this take out a shirt. Like,
what's wrong with that? Like, if you think about it, like, feminism basically made it bad to be like a woman. Like, took anything that was the women's domain and said, you know what, that's bad.
It's funny. I was talking to one of my friends flew in early this week from Nigeria. She's an older woman, but when I went there last year for like a mission trip, and I had a chance to stay in her house. And she's a really wealthy woman. She grew up like the daughter of a chief, and so, she was explaining to me how basically growing up, like, there's it's like very clear, very, very clear roles. Like, especially if your dad is like a chief or he has like a position of power, like there's just certain things that you do. Like, there's just a certain way of operating. There's a certain way of acting. And, she was reflecting on now fast forward, she was like, feminism, I think she said, she noticed how it really tried to push it in the culture, there was one time, there was like, I don't know if it was around Barack Obama, but there was one time and they're really, really pushing feminism. But she said, you know, it got to the point where like, a lot of the people rejected because you had all these women who were coming and talking about how oppressed they were, but then they were using their dad's money because, you know, in that culture, you know, there's still dowries and you have, you know, communities work together. They don't just kick the kids out at 18. Kids may stay there until they get married and they have their own wealth that will be passed down to them. So she was like, you had all these women who were talking about being oppressed, but they were using their dad's money and using their dad's. And she was like, oh, ultimately it just fell apart. Like no one took it seriously, you know, when they went back and they were too busy just trying to survive and trying to survive in their families that they looked at this idea and they're just like, this is not feasible. This is stupid. Let me just.
Yeah. And you know what? It really is stupid. And people are unhappy.
Yeah. So I think these kinds of conversations are really helpful. And if nothing else, it gives a woman, I think, truly the ability to choose. Because it's one thing to say, oh, sexual liberation and, you know, have fun and you're oppressed. But it's nothing to say, hey, you can have all the casual sex you want. If you treat abortion like it is birth control, you actually might get to a point at some age where you no longer can have kids, or you can't find anybody who wants to have kids with you and you don't have anything. Is that what you want? Are you actually okay if that's your life? Are you okay dying alone? Or are you okay if your roommate ends up being your cat and you're later, you know what I mean? Like explaining the different realities, I think would give, to me, if women were empowered with choice when they knew the pros and the cons in each one of their decisions, then we actually might have different, I don't know, we might have different results. I don't know.
Well, you know, it's funny also. So you're going to choose casual sex, which isn't really all that fun in the first place, over getting together with somebody who isn't maybe the handsomest guy, but he loves you and he's faithful to you, and you're going to create a home and start building wealth with this person. You know, you can always do the other stuff later, but is having casual sex with a whole bunch of people the right choice? Apparently that's what people are being led to believe. And there's nothing will mess you up, I would say, more. I think men are much more capable of doing that than women are.
And honestly, I mean, I would try to steer some of these men away from these ladies today, because some of these ladies respectfully are demons. Like, it's like, you shouldn't sleep with her. No. But I understand.
And there's also the story about this friend of mine who had this crazy girlfriend, and then she came knocking on the door and she's like, oh, can we do it just one more time? Oh, gosh. Okay, guess what happened?
You pregnant?
Yeah.
That sounds about right. She got pregnant. And then she tried to trap him with some birth.
Yeah, exactly. He stayed in Illinois. Then she moved to another state, and he was driving to this other state every other weekend to see his daughter.
Absolutely no way. Yeah, see, stuff like that, where it's like, no, absolutely.
So liberated, right? Great. Wonderful.
Oh, man.
Get a baby out of the guy last minute, go somewhere else, make him drive back and forth, pay for everything. It's just so great.
That's insane. That's so insane. Well, this has been, I know we keep on.
Yeah, I know we keep on.
This is good. I know it's probably getting late out here. Yeah.
It's 3 hours. We've got 9 minutes to make it to 3 hours. What do you say?
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh, has it been that? Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I'm a big talker too. So. And this has been really insightful. Means you speaking the original truth. Yes, Saturnine. Oh, choices mean you speaking the original. Yeah. Thank you guys. Those of you in the comment section, y'all know the drill, share this with anybody who you think may find it interesting. Would also love to hear some of y'all feedback on this whole topic, because there was a lot of things that we mentioned. Also, be sure to check her out. You said you're on The Underdog. Is it The Underdog? And
Notes from The Underdog.
Notes from The Underdog. So yeah, so I'm gonna put that in the description. You guys can go check her out on Substack if you would like.
There's not much there. There's not much there, but there will be.
There will be, yes. So coming soon. And also, you guys, you can show support to the show if you liked it. Cash App, Venmo, or you can become a channel member. Show support that way. You get access to exclusive content there, also on my channel membership and Patreon. And yeah, great show, much needed. Agreed. What's going on, Snugs? Good to see y'all. Y'all got to show some more love if you want me to drop the link. People always be like, oh, you got my question. Oh, you got to talk. Y'all got to show a little more love than that. Appreciate it. So yeah, so if you have anything else you want to add, feel free to do so, or otherwise you can hop off. I know it's been quite a bit of time.
Okay, it was wonderful talking with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah.
Glad to do it again.
Yeah, anytime, for sure.
Good night.
Okay, all right, you take care. All right, so that was went a little longer than I anticipated, but we were able to cover off a lot. So I think truly, as I mentioned before, if you really do, anyone who really supports or believes in feminism or believes in women having the ability to choose should be willing to look at these different arguments from both sides. So what I appreciate about the conversation is not only are we, examining, or not only do we examine some of the ideas being promoted, but then you actually look now at what are the repercussions to that. She went off to explain how coming of age for her, sexual liberation, for example, was really portrayed as something liberatory that gave women the ability to choose and to essentially act like men. And so she wanted to say how many people she knew, many women, many of her friends were treating abortion like it was birth control. And we all know that to be true. We've all seen women who, unfortunately, have treated their bodies in that way. Now, what are the repercussions? What can be the repercussions of a woman who literally uses that as birth control, right? Multiple things. There can be psychological repercussions. It's not uncommon for women who do that to sometimes get to a point where they have a hard time conceiving for multiple reasons, spiritual reasons, psychological, or in some cases, just get to a point where they wake up one day and find out that they no longer have the ability to have kids, or there's nobody around them who they want to have kids with, right? And so you can now enter into a phase of life where, you always expected, my ability to choose to have kids is always going to be there. And then you wake up one day and you're like, wait, that's, you find yourself in a space where the children aren't there. And it's not because you didn't necessarily want it. You just were so hell-bent on practicing sexual liberation and just supporting them and just having casual sex and having fun that you never considered what are the steps that you would need to take to actually find someone who you would want to actually have a child with. And she went on to explain, unfortunately, how she knows countless women who when they went down that road actually ended up childless, not because they wanted it, not because they were trying to do the whole child-free, dink thing, but because of their choices. And so I think that's just one of many examples of how, when you are looking at these ideas, which again, a lot of these ideas are just coming, what I believe, from different, think pieces, from different spaces, from different places that aren't really about promoting freedom. They're more about trying to, promote propaganda. But when you examine them, you have to look at the end result. And we're seeing the end result of many of these things is not good. So that's what I liked about it. You said, did I make it? You made it, but you're towards the end, but it's not a problem. You can go back and catch the replay. We covered off a lot. It was interesting to hear her perspective. It was also interesting to hear her perspective about what was going on around her time coming of age. She was looking at what white women are doing versus Black women. That was really powerful. You go back and check that out. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Like, share, subscribe. Heard you. Okay. Y'all good. And yeah, I'd like to hear your guys' feedback. Would love to hear what you guys thought about this. Would love to hear if there's something else that you would like covered. I tried to get as many questions as possible, but a lot of the conversation just naturally free flowed. So I wasn't able to get to all the questions that I had, but I think we were able to essentially cover off a lot of the different concerns that we had up to this point. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for hanging out, and stay tuned for other upcoming content. Stay tuned for other upcoming live. You should hit the notification bell. And again, I will also put the link to her Substack if you guys want to follow her and just follow some of her writings moving forward. And thank you so much for listening if we've gotten this far, guys, and we'll talk later. Okay, bye.
Angel made fall, let the whole world see. Black kings rising high in our own destiny. Moving through the storm, proud and bold we stand. Shining like gold, love's in command.
Misandry tried to put him down with a misandry vibe, but Jermaine flipped the script, now watch him thrive. In a classroom of doubters, his spirit never fell. Every harsh word turned to beats that made him rebel. They came to neighborhood, dropping wisdom like a rhyme. Challenged that old misandry, said, not on my time. With his wife Mia Swahili for strength and grace by his side. They set the record straight with humor and pride. In the dating game and gender wars where opinions clash and play, Jermaine and his crew keep it smooth, dancing hate away from awkward first dates to the battle of the hearts. They flip the script with funky vibes and soulful art. Talk, let them squabble, we're too fly to be confined. Every snide remark just fuels the fire of our mind. With laughter as our armor and pride, our battle cry. Black men rise above it all, reaching up into the sky.
Fall, let the whole world see. Black kings rising high in our own destiny. Moving through the storm, proud and bold we stand. Shining like gold, love's in command.
Miss Andre tried to put him down with her misandry vibe, but Jermaine flipped the script, now watch him thrive. In a classroom of doubts, his spirit never fell. Every harsh word turned to beats that made him rebel. They came to neighborhood, dropping wisdom like a rhyme. Challenged that old misandry, said not on my time. With his wife Mia Swahili for strength and grace by his side. They set the record straight with humor and pride. Game and gender wars where opinions clash and play. Jermaine and his crew keep it smooth, dancing hate away from awkward first dates to the battle of the hearts. They flip the script with funky vibes and soulful art. Talk, let them squabble, we're too fly to be confined. Every snide remark just fuels the fire of our mind. With laughter as our armor and pride, our battle cry. Black men rise above it all, reaching up to the sky.
Fall, let the whole world see. Black kings rising high in our own destiny. Moving through the storm, proud and bold we stand. Shining like gold, love's in command.
Let them talk, let them squabble, we're too fly to be confined. Every snide remark just fuels the fire of our mind. With laughter as our armor and pride, our battle cry. Black men rise above it all, reaching up to the sky.
Fall, let the whole world see.